Is there a meaning or a place for genetics or the karma of the parents in a birth of a person?
In fact, from our religious perspective, there is a concept known as alaya, the storehouse consciousness. Within this alaya are stored the habitual tendencies and impressions carried over from our previous lives. For example, if a person had a strong fondness for dancing in a past life, then from the very moment they are born, they may naturally enjoy dancing. This specific kind of karmic seed then begins to mature over time. This is deeply connected to one's own karma. As for the parents, they are what we call external contributing conditions. Parents are also related to the child. The physical body inherited from the parents affects them. For example, when we pour nourishing soup or water on a seed from the outside, as this grows, it has different flavors, just like that. It's also related to the parents. But the individual is key. It's fundamental. For example, if someone loves to dance but their parents can't, they can still love it from childhood. So their own mind is the primary factor. The parent's role in the formation of the child's body is an external relationship, an external influence.
I would love to hear how you understand free will, and if there is free will. If everything has a seed, and everything is the outcome of something you did before, do you have an option to choose what you want to do now?
And that is exactly how it is. Of course, every single major religion has some ultimate views that are also consistent with this. For the time being, each religion also has its differences. But generally speaking, from the Buddhist perspective, this kind of karma is actually a continuous thread by nature. However, with certain special causes and conditions, it can also be changed. Therefore, Buddhism is not entirely a fatalistic belief system. At a certain point, through the arising of special causes and specific conditions, the course of things can actually change. Thus, in this way, it is fundamentally different from fatalism. It is quite similar to someone being sentenced to death according to the law. Later, however, due to various worldly causes and conditions, that death sentence might not be carried out and could instead be changed to life imprisonment or something of that kind, and so on in the end. Originally, the karma he created was very severe, and he might have gone to hell. But later, he truly repented and performed other virtuous deeds. And because of this, he doesn't have to suffer that punishment. For the time being, it has already been purified. So it's not entirely predestined. However, karma does play a certain leading role.
Okay. Is there also a karma of a nation or a country, or just a personal karma?
In Buddhism, this is called collective karma. As I mentioned earlier, there is a place where many people can recall their past lives. And I've heard that in a certain place in Thailand, the people living there can also clearly remember many of their past lives. It could be that within an ethnic group, in their collective destiny, they often experience suffering or happiness. Countries can also have this. In Buddhism, we call it collective karma. For example, after many people create karma together, those same people later collectively experience the same kind of suffering or happiness as a shared result. This is called collective karma. In Tibetan area, we often talk about our collective karma. I went to Yushu after the earthquake there. At that time, many people died in the earthquake. Because many of us Tibetans are religious believers, they all felt that this was our collective karma. There was nothing that could be done. A lot of people died. Many people had their own understanding and acceptance of it, seeing it as our collective karma.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. I would like to ask about how does one accumulate good karma? Is it something that we learn through external studies from books, or rather from introspection, something that we should realize within ourselves?
There is also much positive karma. First, one cultivates a kind heart. Second, one regularly offers lamps, does charitable work, and practices introspection. We distinguish different kinds of virtue. Ultimate virtue means abiding in the true nature of reality, while conventional virtue means regularly doing these good deeds in daily life. All of these need to be accumulated gradually, step by step.
Okay. So today the Western world takes a lot of techniques from the Buddhism, such as like different kind of meditation or mindfulness. So I would like to know, first of all, what's your opinion about these things? And second, what is the most important thing that the Western world you think can learn from Buddhism or take from Buddhism to the life today?
First, I think meditation is very beneficial. In our religion, meditation is practiced frequently. Actually, nowadays, many people in the West are under a lot of pressure. Many forms of meditation in the West are quite straightforward and simple, but they can help relieve stress and assist individuals in learning to accept some suffering. Particularly in this day and age, because of the rapid advancement of modern science, people's inner worlds are quite unhealthy. So it's still quite a significant challenge for us to endure. This is probably primarily attributed to the influence of Steve Jobs from Apple, because he loved meditation, and then many people started to enjoy practicing it as well. That's the first question. The second important question is to consider is that I think in the modern Western world today, in Buddhism, it is not just a simple matter of religious belief or faith. Shakyamuni Buddha once said something. You should not believe in me just because I am the Buddha. It's like refining gold with a hammer. Whether you are a layperson or a monastic, you should observe with a very rational mindset. If it makes sense, you can accept it. If it does not make sense to you, you are not required to accept it. I think if you study and learn this kind of philosophy in Buddhism, it might be exceptionally well suited not only for the Western part of the world, but I think the rigorous scientific way of thinking and logic is absolutely essential for everyone. Hey.
I wanted to ask about something that about that. I feel that it is something, especially Western people would really usually have a hard time to just believe something, and we tend to want to look for proof for things. And when you talk about reincarnation and death and everything that comes after this life, it's really hard to perceive anything as proof. And so I do wonder, how do you tackle doubts about that? Because I think people are afraid of death and are afraid of dying. And in a way, it's a subject that people try to avoid because it feels like a dead end. And so, yeah.
In fact, certain phenomena within our inner life are not like ordinary material things in the world which can be immediately analyzed and tested by science. These are very difficult to measure. As I mentioned earlier, they are subtle, nuanced, and hidden from view. It is not something that can be seen immediately. However, we also have a great deal of solid evidence that science, even today, is completely unable to explain at all. There is also evidence for past and future lives, including those based on scientific and Western ways of thinking. There is no particularly definitive evidence. There is absolutely no such thing as definitive non-existence. Moreover, there is a lot of evidence that does exist. If you refuse to acknowledge it, then there's nothing that can be done. This reasoning simply cannot be continued. So, as I mentioned earlier about this issue, it must be studied. Only through research can the truth be discovered. If you haven't studied it, you will definitely have doubts and probably won't really believe it. This is a normal phenomenon. And then the issue of death is also extremely significant. Therefore, relying on religious methods to study this is the best approach.
You talked about reincarnation and past experiences, but how does Buddhism view the future? Is there a potential to see the future in the same term that you can see your past reincarnations? Can you see future reincarnations? Or is it to that level that if you can see future reincarnations, you no longer reincarnate?
Regarding these aspects, I once translated a book. It was called Stories of Reincarnation, or The Truth of Life. In fact, many people are quite concerned about their own uncertain future lives, including the moment when they pass away. They care about what their next life will be like. In our Tibetan Buddhism, there are many such cases. Let me explain two things. To begin with, there are numerous documented instances, including many reincarnations that are living among us today, where their previous lives were investigated and verified, and later formally acknowledged as such. The second point is that I once translated a book called The Truth of Life. In that book, it seems there is an English version, or at least there should be one, along with Chinese and Tibetan versions. This scholarly treatise explains many important principles related to this topic in a clear and detailed way.
One more, maybe?
Okay.
Okay, one more.
I'd like to hear your definition of truth.
In fact, there is much to discuss about the truth. When we ultimately consider the true nature of our mind, it is indeed extremely profound. It is neither something that exists nor something that does not exist in any simple, ordinary way at all from its own side. Emptiness like the vastness of space, but this emptiness is also accompanied by luminosity. Once we recognize and understand such a state, this can also be called the truth. When we truly examine the nature of all things in the end, it is just like what physicists today describe in their own language as a final, ultimate energy field. But even that state of existence in the end does not truly exist on its own. This kind of emptiness is also not what we call the ultimate truth. So the ultimate truth actually consists of many different levels. Ultimately, it can be said to be inconceivable and inexpressible. From the viewpoint of many of our perspectives, it can certainly be referred to as the truth. When one fully realizes such a truth, it is called enlightenment.
So I think those were pretty good closing words. So please join me in thanking Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche. And let me just say that whoever wants another taste of Khenpo Lasso, then we'll be lighting candles in the afternoon at 4:05 here in the Gusheva. So everybody's welcome. And there may even be enough sufganiyot for everyone.